it seemed pretty apparent that Biden didn't know what he was saying. He was confused. The answer was very nonspecific. I don't think that this is official U.S. policy, and that's why, for the third time, his staff is walking this back.
And joining us now, Fred Fleitz, a former CIA analyst and chief of staff of the National Security Council under President Trump. He's also now a vice chairman for AFPI's Center for American Security. Welcome to Centerpoint, Fred.
Doug, my friend, I did my first TV interview with you over 10 years ago. It is such a pleasure to do your new show.
Well, that's really kind of you. It's great to see you again. I always enjoyed your insight into world affairs. So let's begin with the latest gaffe that President Biden made. Listen to it right here.
Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?
Yes.
You are?
That's the commitment we made. That's the commitment we made.
Well, like so many other remarks by President Biden, the White House staff is today walking that back, sticking to the U.S.'s longstanding policy, which is sort of an intentional confusion to time about whether or not we would interfere militarily if Taiwan was invaded. But some are suggesting, Fred, that maybe it's the president who's right here and perhaps the White House staff is wrong, that it's time to send that clear signal to the world that the United States will defend Taiwan. What are your thoughts?
Well, Doug, when I saw that interview, I thought it was pretty sad. It seemed pretty apparent that Biden didn't know what he was saying. He was confused. The answer was very nonspecific. I don't think that this is official U.S. policy, and that's why, for the third time, his staff is walking this back. The strategic ambiguity approach, I think, has worked well. We keep the Chinese guessing on what we would do if they decide to invade Taiwan. But when we see developments like this, it makes me think that Biden shouldn't be allowed to answer questions anymore in front of foreign audiences.
He did, now that you mention it, and I look at the look on his face after he made that remark, he sort of has this appearance of bewilderment, like, oops, did I say the right thing there or not? But I wonder if strategic ambiguity might be more important in this day and age when we're hearing all kinds of talk about how the U.S. military is now incapable of fighting a two-front war. And I know that General Keane has told us that the U.S. Navy is now outgunned in the Pacific region.
Well, we know that China has a larger Navy than we do. It has the largest Navy on Earth right now. But it is not a Navy that can expand too far into the Pacific. It is a Navy that would really be a real problem if we were to be engaged in them near the island of Taiwan. Chinese missiles are a real threat, too. The Chinese are developing carrier killer missiles, which are a real concern for us. I think what we should be talking about here is not how our adversaries are getting more dangerous, but the perception of U.S. weakness is emboldening states like China and Russia and Iran to engage in destabilizing activities that they would not attempt if they saw the U.S. as strong and decisive.
Mm-hmm. What does Taiwan need in order to assure their ability to defend themselves?
I think right now Taiwan is studying the conflict in Ukraine. They're looking at what Russia did wrong. They're looking at new defense technologies that allow the David to beat Goliath in the Ukraine conflict. Now, the Chinese government's going to be looking at that, too. But I think there are anti-ship missiles that could be used to shoot down helicopters, the use of drones. I think the Taiwan government is studying that very carefully to learn from the Ukraine crisis.
And Ukraine is the model for this type of warfare.
Well, it is and it isn't, because it would involve an amphibious invasion. It's a different situation than we would see with Russia invading Ukraine. And there's some other unknowns. We don't know how much more capable or less capable the Chinese military would be than the Russian military. My guess is they'd be considerably more capable. But an amphibious invasion is difficult. The Germans knew this in World War II, which is why they never tried to invade England. And you know how difficult the D-Day invasion would be. Taiwan is ready for this, but so there's some similarities, but it is different because it would be an amphibious invasion.
Let's turn to the Ukraine war. Republicans are balking against the expenditure of $40 billion to go primarily in military aid, but there are also other considerations of where that money would go in Ukraine. What are your thoughts about that, about Republican opposition and whether or not that money is needed or should be provided?
I think it's important that we give the maximum amount of support to the Ukrainian military right now, because I think the conflict is at a tipping zone. And if we give them the support, we may be able to get this conflict to maybe peter down to a low simmer. I agree with many of the concerns about the money we're giving to the Ukrainians, because I'm worried that there is an oversight. And I support Senator Rand Paul's call to have an inspector general named to make sure this money is spent wisely and that there's accountability.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the prospects of Putin using nuclear weapons in Ukraine? I've not dismissed that because of the way the war is being prosecuted right now. Ukraine's having a lot of success, although it's largely a stalemate. Putin, I suspect, did not suspect that this would be the case. And I wonder if he's more desperate, in which case tactical nuclear weapons become a real option for him. What are your thoughts?
I think it's still very unlikely, but I believe if Putin really thought he was cornered in some type of situation that he couldn't accept, I think he'd consider it. And I believe that if the Ukrainian military doesn't accept a informal ceasefire and decides to start trying to take back territory, if it tries to take back the Crimea, I worry that might be a red line for Putin, and that might lead him to consider using tactical nukes.
And then how do you prevent a nuclear war from escalating beyond that if it were to happen?
Well, I don't know that tactical nukes would lead to a global nuclear war. It certainly would isolate Russia more. And I think Putin knows that. I think that the Russian military knows that. And, Putin simply can't push a button and set off nuclear weapons or order them to be used. There is a chain of command. And there are many experts who are saying that they don't believe that the Russian military would cooperate with a with a Putin order to use nuclear weapons. And the minute they refuse to follow that order, we may see a coup.
And lastly, about Mr. Putin himself, there are many who have suggested he is not well. You see the distance that he's keeping from many people that he speaks with when he had these meetings, suggesting that perhaps he's immunocompromised or undergoing cancer treatment. Some point to his face, which has gotten fat over the years, as an indication that he's perhaps on steroids. Do you have any insight into his health?
I don't have any insight, but I've been asked this a lot. I've been sent photos of Putin where they've shown what you have suggested. He certainly doesn't look like the healthy Putin he was 6 months ago. Makes me think that there could be something going on, but I'm not a doctor. I shouldn't be diagnosing him. But it's something that we need to consider.
Fred Fleitz, really appreciate your great insight. Wonderful to see you again, and I hope you come back.
Anytime. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.